Ilara Vance was a phantom. The directorate, the clandestine agency she worked for, didn't use her real name in any files. She was simply known by her call sign, Wraith. Her specialty wasn't brute force or high-tech gadgets, but the art of disappearance. She could vanish into a crowd, a shadow, or even plain sight, leaving no trace behind. For 10 years, she had operated in the cold, unforgiving world of espionage. A silent force of intelligence gathering and sabotage. She had never been seen, never been caught, until now. Her mission was a simple, yet critical one: infiltrate a remote mountain stronghold in the nation of Viridia, a hostile state locked in a cold war with her own country. The fortress, known as the Citadel, was rumored to hold Project Chimera, a bioweapon that could turn the tide of the war in Viridia's favor. Ilara's objective was to acquire the data and, if possible, destroy the facility. She had slipped past their perimeter defenses, a complex web of motion sensors and thermal cameras, with an almost supernatural ease. She had navigated the labyrinthine tunnels and silent guard patrols with the precision of a ghost. The final target, a subterranean server room, was within reach. She was a mere 20 feet from the blast door, her heart a steady drum of focused purpose, when she stepped on a loose floor tile. It wasn't a loud sound, just a faint, metallic click. But in the oppressive silence of the corridor, it might as well have been a gunshot. A moment later, the world erupted. From behind hidden panels, a dozen soldiers in black tactical gear emerged, their rifles pointed at her head. An alarm blared, a shrill, mocking shriek that felt like the final word on her career. A larger man, his face scarred and grim, stepped forward. He wasn't one of the grunts. She knew him from the intelligence briefs. Colonel Draven, the infamous butcher of the North, known for his brutal efficiency. He looked at her with an expression of triumph that made her skin crawl. "Wraith," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We've been waiting for you." Ilara didn't struggle. She had been trained for this moment. Struggle would only make it worse. She let them cuff her, her hands held behind her back by a pair of heavy-duty polymer restraints that felt impossibly tight. They led her away, not to an interrogation room, but to a holding cell deep within the Citadel. It was a small, windowless concrete box, with a single steel cot and a drain in the floor. The only light came from a reinforced bulb in the ceiling that hummed with a maddening, incessant drone. As the heavy door clanged shut, she was left in a silence that was even more terrifying than the alarm. She was no longer a phantom. She was just a woman, alone and helpless, trapped behind enemy lines. For the first 24 hours, they left her alone. Ilara used this time to do what she did best: observe. Her senses, honed by years of training, were her only tools. She analyzed the cell. The concrete was thick, the door impenetrable, but the light fixture had a loose wire. The drain in the floor was covered by a grate that had been corroded by years of neglect. She listened. The guard who checked on her every 4 hours had a distinct limp, the sound of his boot scraping the floor a unique identifier. She noted the shift changes, the timing of the food deliveries, the patterns of the patrols. She was still a ghost, but she was trapped in a cage. Her job now was to turn the cage into her weapon. On the second day, a gaunt, bespectacled man entered her cell. He was the interrogator, a psychological expert named Dr. Volkov. He was all soft words and sharp questions, trying to chip away at her composure. He showed her a video feed of her parents' house, a silent threat that hung in the air. Ilara said nothing. She had been trained to resist, to maintain a blank slate, and her training held. Dr. Volkov eventually left, frustrated, leaving a half-eaten protein bar on the cot. Ilara waited until the door was shut, then she swallowed it whole, saving the wrapper in her cheek. It was a small detail, but details were everything. On the third day, Draven himself came to see her. He sat on the opposite side of the steel door, a grim smile on his face. He talked about her country, about her family, trying to get a rise out of her. He spoke of the great work they would do together, how she could be of service to them. "You're smart, Wraith," he said. "You're a professional. You know when to cut your losses. There's no way out of here. No one knows you're here. You're a ghost, remember? Ghosts don't have rescue parties." He was right. Her mission was considered a black op, a one-way ticket. There was no cavalry coming over the hill. She was on her own. And in that moment, she realized her greatest weakness was also her greatest strength. If no one was coming for her, no one would be looking for her. She had nothing to lose. Ilara's plan was a slow burn, a game of calculated risk and infinite patience. The first step was to get a tool. The loose light fixture was her target. During the next guard shift, the one with the limping guard, she put her plan into motion. As the guard, a young man who looked bored out of his mind, approached her cell, she feigned a violent coughing fit, convulsing on the floor. It was a well-practiced bit of theater. The guard hesitated. Then, out of a flicker of human concern, he opened the small viewing port in the door. It was a rookie mistake. "I need water," she rasped, her voice thick with fake desperation. He slid a small bottle of water through the port. She took it, her hands shaking, and then, with a sharp, unexpected movement, she rammed the bottle's rigid plastic cap into the port's hinges. It wasn't a lockpick, but it wedged the port open just enough for a single finger to fit. The guard, startled, tried to close it, but it was stuck. He cursed under his breath and walked away, the scrape of his foot echoing down the hall. That night, she began to work. It was a grueling, agonizing process. She used the plastic wrapper from the protein bar as a small wedge, slowly prying at the loose light fixture. The plastic was flimsy, but her patience was boundless. Over hours, she worked it loose. The hum of the bulb stopped, plunging her into a profound, total darkness. But she didn't stop. By touch alone, she continued to work, her fingers like a surgeon's, until finally, with a soft pop, a small metal plate fell into her hand. It was no bigger than a coin, but its edge was sharp. She had a weapon. The next night, the guard with the limp came to check on her. He opened the port, saw the darkness, and cursed again. "Get a light, you idiot," he grumbled, more to himself than to her. He didn't see Ilara, crouched in the corner of her cell, the metal plate held tightly in her palm. When he reached to slide the food tray through, she moved. It was a swift, silent motion, an explosion of controlled violence. Her hand shot out of the port, the metal plate a blur, and she sliced a deep gash across the man's hand. He cried out in surprise and pain, stumbling back. She didn't hesitate. She knew her target. As he staggered, she launched her body against the door, the flimsy plastic of her earlier work straining. The guard, panicked, dropped his keys. They clattered on the floor, the sound impossibly loud. He looked at her, then down at his keys, his mind racing. He was about to yell for help, to raise the alarm. Ilara had already anticipated this. She launched her body against the door again, the flimsy plastic finally breaking. The guard, still dazed, looked up. Ilara's hand shot out again, this time to the man's throat. With a single, expertly placed strike, she found the pressure point. The man's eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed, unconscious, his keys clutched in her hand. The whole thing had taken less than 5 seconds. She unlocked the door, her hands working the mechanism with a practiced ease. She didn't leave the cell, not yet. She dragged the unconscious guard inside, stripped him of his uniform, and pulled it on herself. The uniform was too big, but it was better than nothing. She took his radio, his knife, and his sidearm, a heavy, clunky thing that felt reassuring in her hand. She waited. Her internal clock was as precise as a chronometer. She knew that in a few minutes, the limping guard's partner would come looking for him. She had a plan, and she was going to use it. She hid the unconscious guard under the steel cot and stood by the door, waiting in the darkness. The humming of the empty light fixture was the only sound. A few minutes later, she heard the footsteps. This one was lighter, more confident. He was a veteran. He would know something was wrong. "Riker, you good?" The guard called out, his voice sharp with suspicion. Ilara didn't answer. She heard the sound of a key in the lock, then a moment of hesitation. The guard was wary. He was looking for the trap. He cracked the door open and peered inside, his hand on his sidearm. He saw the darkness, the overturned tray, and the lack of a body. He stepped inside, his guard up, scanning the cell. "Riker," he said again, his voice lower this time, a warning. Ilara was not in the cell. She was on the floor, a shadow behind the door. As he took his second step, she was up, her hand on the sidearm. She used his own weapon against him. A single, sharp strike to the head with the butt of the weapon. He collapsed without a sound. 2 down. She took his uniform and his gear, her small body now hidden in the layers of their clothing. She had 2 radios, 2 knives, and 2 sidearms. She was no longer just a ghost. She was a silent killer, and she was going to turn this place into a cemetery. Her next target was the main corridor's security room. She knew the layout from the reconnaissance she had done before her capture. She used the limp of the first guard, Riker, as a psychological crutch. She walked through the corridors, her body moving with a trained purposefulness, the limp an unspoken pass. She passed 2 other guards who paid her no mind, assuming she was just another one of their own, making her rounds. The security room was on the 3rd level, a fortress of a room with a reinforced steel door and a single camera that monitored the hallway. Ilara used her second knife to pry open a small ventilation duct. She had noticed on her way to the cell. The duct was barely wide enough for a child, but Ilara was lithe and flexible, her body a coiled spring of controlled strength. She wormed her way through the dusty confines of the duct, the sound of her breathing echoing in her ears. She could hear the guards' conversation from the other side, a mix of bored chatter and static from their radios. She found the vent above the security console and carefully, meticulously, removed the grate. She had to be precise. A single dropped screw could give her away. She worked in the darkness, her hands moving with a fluid, balletic grace. She finally removed the grate, inch by agonizing inch, and peered down. 2 guards were sitting at the console, their eyes fixed on the array of monitors. They were distracted. It was her moment. She lowered a length of thin wire, a part of the old light fixture's wiring, into the room. She maneuvered it with a surgeon's skill, snaking it down toward a single, exposed power line. She had to create a brief power surge that would fry the console and give her the chance to act. She connected the wire, and a flash of blue light illuminated the room for a split second, followed by a shower of sparks and a deafening pop. The monitors went black. The guards were on their feet instantly, cursing. "What was that?" one of them yelled. "It's a power surge," the other replied, his voice laced with annoyance. "Check the breakers." Ilara didn't wait. As one of the guards turned his back, she dropped from the vent, landing with the sound of a feather. She moved with an animalistic speed, her knife a blur of motion. She slit the throat of the first guard, silencing him before he could even scream. The second guard, startled, spun around, his hand on his holster. But Ilara was already on him, her body a whirlwind of fists and elbows. She disabled him with a flurry of strikes, hitting a pressure point in his neck that sent a jolt of pain through his body, leaving him unconscious on the floor. For down? She sat at the console, her fingers flying across the dark keyboard. The system was offline, but the hard drive still held the data. She inserted a small thumb drive she had hidden in her boot, her fingers working with a blur of motion, downloading the blueprints of the Citadel, the troop movements, and, most importantly, the location of Project Chimera. The download was slow, but she had all the time in the world. She had already taken out the two guards and was alone in the security room. She had turned their fortress into her hunting ground. The real challenge was the final target. Project Chimera was located in a sealed-off biolab on the lowest level, protected by multiple layers of security and, according to her intel, Draven himself. She had the blueprints, she had the data, but her mission was to destroy the facility. That meant getting inside, bypassing the guards, and detonating the charges. She knew it would be her most difficult task yet, but she was no longer the helpless prisoner. She was the hunter. She made her way to the lab, her stolen uniforms providing the perfect cover. She knew their patrol patterns, their shift changes, their blind spots. She was no longer just a shadow. She was one of them, a wolf in sheep's clothing. She took out a total of 7 more guards on her way, each time a silent, precise maneuver. She used her knowledge of pressure points, their own environment, and their arrogance to her advantage. She never fought them face to face unless absolutely necessary. She used the darkness, the confined spaces, and their own complacency against them. By the time she reached the blast door of the biolab, she had an armory of stolen weapons and a grim, almost feral, confidence. The blast door was sealed, a 6-inch thick slab of steel with a retinal scanner. She had to wait for a guard to come by, and she didn't have to wait long. A young, nervous-looking guard approached, his hand shaking as he swiped his card. He looked at her, his eyes full of fear. "What's the password?" he stammered. "The password is 'Don't talk to me,'" she said, her voice a low growl. "You just open the door, and I'll do the rest." He looked at her, then back at the door. He didn't know what to do. He was too afraid to run, too afraid to fight. She watched his eyes, and she knew she had him. She moved with a silent, calculated speed, her hand on his gun. She disarmed him in a flash, and then, before he could scream, she knocked him out cold. She used the retinal scanner, and the door swung open. Draven was waiting for her. He stood in the middle of the lab, a massive man with a grim, almost predatory smile on his face. He was surrounded by his own personal guard, 2 men who were as big as he was. "I knew it was you, Wraith," he said. "The patrols are going quiet. I thought it was a malfunction. Then I realized it was you." "The Phantom is back," Ilara said, her voice a low whisper. "But you're not a ghost anymore," Draven said. "You're a cornered animal. You can't win this. There's no way out." "I don't need a way out," Ilara said. "I just need to finish the job." She threw her stolen weapon to the side. "This is between you and me, Colonel." The fight was a blur of motion. Draven was a monster, a man of raw, brutal strength. But Ilara was a dancer. She used his own weight against him, his own momentum. She was fast, agile, and she knew exactly where to hit him. He threw a punch. She dodged it, hitting him in the throat with a sharp strike. He was stunned, but he came back with a flurry of punches. She took them, a grim, determined look on her face, but she didn't back down. She hit him with a series of quick, brutal strikes, targeting his pressure points, his joints, his soft spots. He was bleeding, his face a mask of fury. He finally caught her, his hand closing around her throat. "I have you now," he growled. Ilara didn't panic. She had been trained for this moment, for this kind of struggle. She used the knowledge she had acquired from Dr. Volkov's psychological taunts. He had been trying to get her to break, to give up. But she had been training for this moment her whole life. She was a weapon, a ghost. She had nothing to lose. She used her last resort. She leaned in, her lips close to his ear, and whispered, "I know about your family, Colonel. I know about your wife and your kids. I know everything." Draven's grip loosened, just for a moment. It was all she needed. She used his moment of hesitation against him, her body a whirlwind of motion. She struck him in the head with her elbow, a single, decisive blow that sent him to his knees. He was stunned, his mind racing. She didn't wait. She hit him again, a final, brutal blow that sent him to the ground. He was out cold. She took out the 2 guards with her mind a blur of motion. She had to finish the job. She took the data chip from the console, and then, with a grim determination, she set the charges. She knew she had to get out of there. The alarm would be going off soon, and the whole place would be on lockdown. She had to move fast. She made her way back to the surface, her body aching, her clothes soaked in blood and sweat. She was no longer a phantom. She was a survivor. She had come in as a ghost, and she was leaving as a force of nature, a legend that would be whispered about in the corridors of power for years to come. She had been captured, she had been humiliated, but she had turned her greatest weakness into her greatest strength. She had gone from being a helpless victim to a lethal hunter, and she had done it all on her own. She was no longer a ghost. She was a legend. She made it to the surface, her lungs burning, her heart pounding. The sun was rising, a beautiful, fiery spectacle that illuminated the snow-covered mountains. She looked back at the citadel, a grim fortress that was now a monument to her success. She had done it. She had completed her mission. She was finally free. She turned and walked into the sunrise, a grim, determined look on her face. She had a long way to go, but she was finally free. She had survived, and she had won.